I guess the point of this whole entire conversation is to talk about the journey, right? The 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 progression of what I would refer to as leveling up entrepreneurship and what that kind of looks like. And to not always think of like, hey, this is kind of like from like an outside in, right? What people see now, right? It's like most people don't understand like the steps and the struggles, right? Like from I've experienced it all, right? From a point of not being able to afford food to being homeless, right? Dumping every single dollar into trying to make it, right? So let's just start from the beginning. So, um, went to University of Delaware. From that point, when I graduated school about a decade ago, a little bit more than that, I was trying to figure out what to kind of do, right? And I didn't really have a direction of what industry I wanted to be in. All I knew that I was typically good at talking to people, and I was in a position where I think some sort of sales job was going to slingshot me into some sort of success, right? When I was younger, the point of going to work for a big company was always like the direction for everybody, right? Was I'm going to go work for JP Morgan, I'm going to go work for this big media company, well, whatever the direction is, right? That was what society drew out for you. And you were going to work there for 30 years and that was what you were going to do. So, out of school, I got a job at WB Mason. I had a friend of a friend who worked there, ended up getting a sales job. So, moved from Delaware to Central Jersey, and then that's when my first sales experience began, right? If you're not familiar with WB Mason, it's an office supply company, and very, very interesting concept because you think of like, oh, well, it's just paper, pens, toners, paper clips, right? You can make a pretty good living doing that. So I put my head down. I worked real hard for just over a year and a half there, built a really large book of business, um, to the point to where I was the one of the top performers on a monthly basis and growing into that space. Me thinking if I just work really hard, this corporate company is going to reward me, when in fact it was completely ass backwards. Right? I busted my ass. I worked every day. I would work late. They would ask requests to go work in the warehouse to help with shipping. I would do deliveries. It was a mess. And the outcome of that was I'm working all these hours to potentially make it to, a six-figure plus sales job, right? Because in your head, when you're just graduating school, the only thing that you're thinking about is like, I need to make six figures because 100 grand from what we're all taught, right? It's a lot of money. We'll kind of get to that later. Okay. But so that's what I did. I just worked and worked and worked. And I got to a point and I got into a kind of an awkward situation where, there was I guess we don't really need to dive into it, but there was a situation that happened from a scenario. I was supposed to be given something, and I thought it was my time to receive that based on where I was and what the work I was doing, and it didn't happen. So instantly had a bad taste in my mouth of what corporate America was from that single situation, right? So my sister is in medical sales for years. So I was like, okay, maybe I'll pivot from that point into some sort of medical sales. So I applied to medical device, pharmaceutical sales, right? I into another sales, but in medical, because in the if you compare sales jobs, right, you would assume that a medical company would be more prestigious of a job than selling office supplies. Okay. I thought that most people did. Like, oh, you're moving into into the medical sales. So I ended up getting a job in pharmaceutical sales. I did that for a few years and I had pretty decent success with that, but it was so unfulfilling. It was the most boring, monotonous job I think I've ever worked in my entire life. If you think about it, when you think of who they're putting into these medical jobs, you don't need to be a bright person. I always used to say like the job could be done by a monkey. You're a delivery person and all you do is drop samples off when you're in the pharmaceutical sales space. And a fulfilling job and people that work fulfilling jobs now, the job needs to be self-fulfilling. Otherwise, it becomes monotonous and boring, right? Like, what am I doing? So I'm doing this and I had a lot of success in the pharma business. I was doing well. I was hitting numbers. Um, During that time, right? getting big commission checks in the medical space is very normal, making $75,000, $75,000 in a bonus check, right, on top of your salary. So, being 23, 24 years old, right, making $150,000 a year, right, it's fulfilling. Couple things, right? When you start to break down the math of, okay, I did this many scripts, this is about how much, like, you look at the revenue that the company made, and then for them to give you a 30, 40, 50 grand, and you're like, shit, they made $40 million on my work. And you get like a 0.000% of the comp of that project, right? It's like, it was, I always said it was like a slap in the face. That it's like, they're like, oh, good job, here you go. Yeah, did you like the money? Yeah, absolutely you did. But then it just reinforced what I was looking from the outside in of like, okay, corporate is not going to be the place for me. I can't handle that. I'm going to be honest. I'm horrible with people telling me what to do. I need to be making decisions, right? It's just the way my personality is. I'm going to conflict constantly. So during these two jobs, the realization was I realized that I could do this better than how they do this. And I'm going to do it faster. I'm going to do it more efficiently. And in essence, all the money goes to the top. So that's what I want. That's the position I want to be in. Little did I know the struggles that come before that, right? Because people don't really talk about that because it's very, very rare for a business owner to do kind of what I did. So, prospectively, it was like, okay, what do I do? I want to go into business for myself. So you sit and you think of like, what are the things that you like, right? Like, all right, so I was an athlete for my entire life since I'm 5 years old, right? Always some sort of competitive sports, right? I pole vaulted competitively in college at a Division I school. I did decathlon at a Division I school. So everything kind of led to kind of this conversation was always really liked fitness. So at the conclusion of college, when I was pretty much done with competitive sports at that point, I still did some sort of, I did a lot of I did a lot of pole vaulting events after school to kind of continue to stimulate myself, trying to see if I could develop anything out of it. And the realization was that typically you kind of have to pick a direction. There's not enough time in a day. So I really, really struggled after school to get into a routine to go to the gym on a daily basis. At the time, I was living with my friend Adam, who I went to school with, and I lived with him while I was working. It was so bad to the point where like he worked at Lifetime Fitness up the road, and I just wouldn't even go. I was never a go to the gym kind of guy. I needed some sort of structure, organization. So my buddy bought me a week membership at a CrossFit gym. That's kind of how like everything kind of unraveled into the gym business. After doing CrossFit, basically got hooked on it. It was great. It was perfect for me. It was okay. This is when the class time starts. You show up, you do it. You're expected to. The class is organized for you, and you go home if you want to at that point. But what I loved about it was the competitiveness side of it that a lot of people tend to not like, right? But for me, it was like, I liked that more than the fitness side. Okay. It was challenging. It didn't matter what skill level you were. I remember my first class, like, it was like, oh, it was just like ab mat sit-ups, and I got like my ass beat by a bunch of girls, right? And I'm like, oh, I'm in good shape, right? You just don't even understand it unless you've done it before. So that's kind of like how my fitness in CrossFit kind of started, was while I was working these corporate jobs. And as I developed more and more and more, and the outside in, you look and you're like, okay, and you start doing numbers in your head, this many members charging this much money, the rent's probably this or that. And you kind of calculate in your head and like, oh, you can make a pretty good living doing this. Okay. Again, this is when I thought making $250,000 a year was a significant amount of money. Okay. So when you start doing that and like your goal is like, how do I do that? How do I make $250,000 a year? And you look at this like, okay, you could do this. I like the industry. I like the sport, right? I like the fitness side of this. It's like, I'm very passionate about it. I think I could do this. I want to get into the gym business. I hate fucking corporate. I want out of this. How am I going to do it? So in the pharmaceutical space, I had a territory in Northwest New Jersey, right? And I'm driving around, and then kind of out of a coincidence, a gym is closing, shutting down. I know who the owner of the gym is, and I meet with him in this space. So I end up buying the equipment from him. I didn't have any money. So what did I do? I took The I had like 10 grand in an IRA and I just liquidated the money out of it. And I used that money to start the gym. Okay. Here in Sparta, New Jersey. Right. I only found this location because it was part of my cold calling territory and it was like a coincidence and it was like right time, right place. Okay. So once that piece happened, again, I have no money. All I have is this retirement account that you're not really supposed to pull the money out of or you get penalized. Okay. So I pulled this money out to pay for this equipment, literally had enough for only the first month's rent. Didn't have a security deposit. I paid it over time to the landlord. I had no fucking idea how to run a gym. I barely taught any classes at this point. I had no business owner experience and I had no plan on how I was ever going to make money doing this. No idea. I did like a business plan, but it's like you buy these shit programs online and you fill in the information and it's like they don't help you. Anyone that says that going to write a business plan is going to help you, they're too analytical and they're not hands-on. They're not going to be as successful. Just my personal opinion. So so now I'm working this pharma job and I'm living in the time just outside Morristown. I was in like a really shit relationship and it was like on its way out. And I'm going to move up into Sparta because at the time I had a choice. I had a apartment that I was paying like 2 grand a month for, and my lease was up. So I either resigned or I'm like, okay, if I just live in the gym, I take that 2 grand and every month I'll just buy equipment every single month. Okay. And that's what I did. So I lived in this little tiny office. I wake up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I would just teach classes. And in the middle of the day, I would go work pharma I did it for only a few months until I had enough clientele from just natural growth and referrals that I had enough to be able to say, okay, I'm not doing this anymore and I'm going to go all in on this. Okay. So that's like the intro of how I got into the CrossFit and into the gym business was that exact formula. Okay. So for me, I like the gym business and I got into it originally because I enjoyed the aspect of I want to help as many people reach some sort of fitness goal, whatever that is for them individually. I want to impact as many people as possible. And I still do. And I still love this business because of that. But we follow a really, really strict business plan, right? Based on our successes and failures within the gym business. When you work, right, and you work, it doesn't matter what kind of job you're working, you need to have some sort of fulfillment, right? So the gym business was the fulfillment because of what you're doing and what you're impacting for people. Okay. So it was that. And then at the same time, it's like, okay, how do I build a career out of this? How can I financially be stable enough to where I could potentially, you know, live on this, have a family, buy a home, you know, and develop what we call the American dream, right? Like that piece of it. So as that started, we started to grow, started to grow, started to grow. So 2014, 2015, so that was April, it was April 1st, 2014 is when I officially was my location. So Station Athletics or CrossFit Sparta, whatever you want to kind of start with, that's where that started was April 1. So now it's like, okay, I need to figure out how to run this business. So over the course of the first year, it was, okay, making decisions. Okay, this worked or this didn't work. Just trying to understand basic marketing. Um, the plus side that I had was I had a really strong sales background. So when you circle back, the best sales training I ever had was from this office supply company. I had one of the best sales trainers, this guy Anthony, and it was so helpful because it teaches you how to overcome basically being told no. And in the sales industry, if you know anything about sales, it's all about overcomes and how do you persuade or convince somebody, it's a lot of psychology, to buy into whatever you're doing. Okay. So you need them to understand the product line. You need them to like you. Okay. And you can't be pushy. If you figure out those three basic things of how to be persuasive and make someone feel comfortable, you could sell a paperclip or an airplane. Right. And that's something that he instilled in me really, really early on. And you remember the offsite business is very interesting. It's like we used to get kicked out of buildings. You're trying to figure out who buys the paper, right? So it's like, it's very intricate and it's a lot of note taking. So I built a really strong base on sales experience. So rolling it into the gym business, it was really, really easy for me to convince someone to sign up for a gym membership. Okay. Um, and then we kind of developed it from there. Okay. There's so many components. So every year after that, we basically opened up one location a year for 7 years. Right. And we fast forward to 2020. We're in a really, really great place. Okay. And we roll into, the following year, the whole fucking country gets shut down. We went from running a $5 million business, legit $5 million a year business. And then I get kicked in the dick and all my gyms get shut down in New Jersey because it was one of the strictest outside of New York from reopening. It was a very difficult time, but I had a lot of support from other things that kind of made it a lot easier. Okay. And now you fast forward now, 2023, we're in the middle of opening up 2 more locations. Okay. We're going to be back to 7 again very, very soon. Okay. And we're in a position now to where we're growing 15 to 30%. We completely control the marketplace. And it's based on a couple things. It's based on creating a skill that no one else was doing at the time. So if we kind of backtrack and you go to like 2014, 2015 again, everyone nowadays understands social media advertising. In 2014 and 2015, fucking nobody was doing it. Okay. So we figured out the idea of how to start targeting people, and Facebook and Instagram at the time were really, really loose on what you were allowed to do then. So you could basically target people. I could target people that made $500,000 a year, owned a home. They liked, there's so many different keywords and things that you could do. So the reason and how we grew so fast was strictly our advertising platform was light years ahead of everybody else in the area. And it allowed me to run a pre-sale on a new location and it would be full in 30 to 45 days. And I'm talking about selling $200 a month intro price memberships. So a premium membership to a CrossFit gym or small group training gym. Okay. And day one, we're revenuing $25,000, $40,000 on a monthly basis. How can you lose when you do that? So we went all in, right? I took every dollar that I was making from the successful gyms and like, we're doing a fucking another one again and again and again. And that's what we did over and over and over again. And then a couple little things and twists, understanding how the sales process worked, right? To now, a lot of our gyms, they're capped. Memberships are capped. We have waiting lists. Charge whatever the hell we want on them, right? Because our product is so superior to everything. So it's really easy for me to say, okay, to my team, we're going to go into Hackensack and we're going to open a location because we know that it can't not be successful because of how we operate. Okay. And this kind of leads me into my next thing, right? If you as a business owner, or you want to be in a startup entrepreneur position, you want to own your own thing and have control over it, you need to get really, really good at one thing until it's so fucking boring to you. But let me tell you, you being the best, right? Whether it's in your mind, like you are the best at this skill, and you have someone who's a competitor but is mediocre at 10 things, you're going to crush them every single time. Because focusing on that one single thing allows you to develop an entire business around that thing, and no one can compete with you. I learned that a long time ago with a mentor, that just focus on the one aspect of what you're really, really good at and see how you can build the business around it. So that's what we did. Like for me, what I'm really, really good at is structural setup of businesses, because I micro look at every single piece of the business down to where, like, how I want the paperwork filed. Like ridiculous. You can ask my employees, if you have a stapler in the wrong spot of the desk, I'll freak out. I can't handle it. It's just how I am. It's how I'm hardwired. To the point to where, like, if I want something laminated for a display, right? Like, those are the things that, from a micro piece, that separate you from everything else. But what the flip of why the business was so successful was the advertising piece. My team became so good from the A to Z process that we could make projections on a monthly, quarterly, yearly basis, and they would be pretty much to a T. So we could plan for the future on what we're going to do, open up new locations, hire new staff, and roll into that. When you look at like business progression, okay, most people will stay in some sort of industry, but what I developed was what I've kind of just talked about was taking a skill that you can move to anything. Okay. So knowing that I could open a gym and do what we did, the progression started of like, okay, we could probably do this for anything, right? So I helped a buddy of mine who has like a really successful like carpet cleaning business, and I showed him the whole basis of how to set this up, and he's doing really well. He still does the same thing, right? So it doesn't matter really what business it is. You're doing the roofing business, the barber business. So while I'm building this platform, become really friendly with members, right? I'm getting on the competitive side of CrossFit, right? So we're traveling all over the country and the world, competing competitively in CrossFit at a high level, me and my staff and my friends. So while all this is happening, we're running and driving traffic to these gyms to continue to grow them. And by sheer coincidence, my now partner joined my local gym here in Sparta. And that was in 2015, the summer of 2015. And he goes, hey, I'm looking to start a marketing advertising firm for pre-IPOs. And I'm like, well, what the hell is that? No idea what it is. He's like, I see what you're doing in the gym business with your advertising. Do you think that you can make this work for this industry? And I go, yeah, I mean, we can try and kind of see what it, like how it goes. So we built out a platform, a funnel system, a lead generation service for that, and executed it. Now that business explodes literally overnight. It goes from being a, pretty successful marketing firm to being now the largest marketing firm in the country for that specific marketing industry. Okay. And it was literally done by these three things: right place, right time, right skill. That is it. Either the correct skill at that exact moment to execute in an industry that had a never ending limit of, not for nothing, like how much money you can make. And two, now I'm not advertising a 10 or 15 mile square radius. I'm advertising from Singapore to Hawaii, the entire United States, South America, the entire world at this point. Doing the same exact thing I did in the gym business. Like I'm talking about like exactly the same thing, just changing the verbiage and changing the direction of who we're trying to target to get on the phone. Okay. So, and that's where Prior to IPO was born, was that. So again, having the right skill from the gym business, I was now able to slingshot it into this marketing firm that completely changed the course of hundreds of people's lives. Okay. And at the same exact time was perfect timing to be involved in a totally different business. So now this company starts, right? 2015, it starts to roll. Year and a half later, starts to really pick up traction. 2018, 19, 20, this thing freaking explodes prior to IPO. Okay. But to being the number one platform for this specific business. Okay. So now what we did is, so now I have this gym business that's doing really, really well. And I have this other marketing company that's doing really, really well, doing the same shit, but it's a different business or a different industry, excuse me, right? So totally different industry, same exact setup, same platform. And to talk about this really, really quickly, the structure was exactly the same. The traffic was set up exactly the same. It was just the industry changed, so you made little tiny tweaks for it. Now I have the gym business. COVID happens. It's okay that COVID happens. I didn't like it at the time, right? Who the hell liked that? And then now I have this other marketing company that's crushing it and continuously crushing it during COVID and growing at a rapid pace, right? So now we're in a position to where now I have multiple income streams based on that. Same skill though, right? I'm going to keep saying this is it's the same exact skill. It's the same exact monotonous work of structure, just a different industry. The one thing that I do really well is those few things. is monotonously, continuously doing the same thing at a very, very high level over and over and over again. And that's advertising and structure. Right? Creating a strong structure allows you to do a lot of strong things and hands-off work. So if you wanted to go work and do other things, I always like to say someone that owns a business that thinks they're a business owner, they're not a business owner if they're in there every day operating it. You're an owner operator. That's what you are. To be a true business owner, you need to be able to go to Italy, go to Greece, right? Go to Egypt for 30 days and then come back and the business is operating exactly the same way when you left. That is the true definition of a business owner. Because you can be hands-off in any aspect that you want. If you want to be hands-on, you can. But if you have the ability to leave, that's, in my opinion, a true definition of that, right? So now, right? So now we have these two businesses. Prior to IPO is still doing great, right? And we're fortunate enough to do really, really well. So now it's like, okay, we start getting into like, well, what are we going to invest our money into, right? I'm buying stocks. I'm learning more about the business. And because that was kind of the direction of what you're supposed to do. So now we kind of went through the basics of, right, from the evolution of Joe, right? The evolution was corporate America, gym business. Then we rolled into, this marketing firm. And then the next piece is it's like, you look at some very wealthy individuals. I'm talking about people worth, I don't know, so let's say north of like $20 million. Like, how do they do that? And most of these people do it in the form of real assets, what I would refer to as a hard asset. And none of this is ever taught to you. So when you're looking at the outside in, it's like, oh, man, how the fuck does this person make so much money? And how do they continuously make money? Like, are they making 5 million a year and they just keep doing it every single year after year? And the answer is no, they don't do that. Okay. So when I looked at real estate, I was talking to a really good friend of mine who's a mortgage broker local here. And he goes, Joe, you should invest money in real estate. And he gave me like a basic 101 of it. Buy a piece of property, put a renter in it, and then that person will cover the mortgage. And that was all the base knowledge that I kind of knew. I was fortunate. We made a lot of money over the last several years. So I'm like trying to figure out what am I going to do with it? Right? Did the whole thing. You bought cars, you bought watches, vacations, dumb shit. Okay. But those things all, like, there's a lot of depreciating assets or depreciating liabilities in my perspective on all that money. Right. So getting into real estate, I was like, okay, the point of getting into real estate was this one thing originally was I wanted to buy a cash flowing asset that was going to pay me money on a monthly basis and make this no longer a liability, right? So when I look at real estate, it's like, okay, if I buy this piece of property and the mortgage is $1,000 a month and this person's paying me $2,000, that means I'm going to make $1,000 a month passively. And if I have to pay for repairs, you pay for repairs. Okay. So I get into my first home, right? At the time I have my own house that I'm living in. And then I buy my first rental property, single family home. Fucking disaster. Okay. Overpaid for it. I was kind of just misguided in a sense because I just didn't really know what I was doing. I just assumed, oh, I'm going to buy this house. It already has a renter in it. I'm going to take it over. And this is what the mortgage is. Oh, it's a pretty good interest rate. I just didn't look at enough at it. I was just honestly just naive about it. So I did it. I'm like, fuck, this sucks. It barely was breaking even. I think I was losing $50 a month, not including if I had to do repairs. I'm like, all right, I need to do better at this. So I did more research. So within that time, I went from one property to about 6, 7, 8 properties that were all investment rental properties and got better at it every single time. Right. So how I backtracked here was like, okay, I'm going to buy these homes. I'm going to keep trying to learn more of how I do this. And then I went back to my basics of, okay, if I could implement some sort of basic buying structure, I'm not going to ever purchase something that isn't going to be what I consider fall into my category of a cash flowing asset. Okay. So over the course of that year in 2021, right, I started buying all this real estate. By the end of that year, had about 30 properties, roughly, or 30 units. Okay. So 30 doors is what we refer to in the business. And it all starts working. So now I'm making $300 a month from that property, $400 from this, $1,500 from that property. and it starts to roll, and I'm starting to visually see this. I'm like, wow, this is pretty good, right? And it's like, okay, you're making 15, 20,000 on a monthly basis, completely hands off because I have someone managing all the properties. It's pretty good. So I'm paying all the mortgages, all the expenses, and you're still putting money in your pocket. I'm like, okay, I really like this space. It's very hands off. So how I kind of pivoted on that, I realized after understanding a couple key things, how real estate can benefit you for more than just cash flow. I realized that I got into real estate for all the wrong reasons. I got into real estate for cash flow, but I didn't have a cash flow problem. I had a tax problem. Not saying that I have a tax issue with the government because I don't, right? The tax problem was I was doing my businesses were creating so much income that my tax liability was huge. So how do you fix that? You invest a shit ton of money into real estate, and there's a couple tricks that you can do that give you advanced appreciation on that money that you don't pay taxes or a really, really small amount of money. So after understanding this, after the first year, it was like, wow, I'm in real estate for the wrong reason. Cash flow is great, right? And I'm not saying that it's bad, but the three parts of real estate that I developed after that first year was real estate can produce a cash flowing asset that pays you money every month. Okay. It can be a depreciating asset. So that means that you could offset money that you put into real estate and not have to pay capital gain on that money. Okay. So there's no tax or very little tax when you invest in real estate. And then the third piece is real estate appreciates in value anywhere from, the last couple of years, anywhere from like 1.8% to 5-6% a year, depending on where you are in the country. So I was looking at it all wrong. And then when I finally understood those three things, I'm like, I'm going to buy as much real estate as possible, and it's going to completely offset my taxable gain. And that's where JVP Ventures kind of like, I wasn't planning on making a property company. I wasn't planning on it. But the more I looked at it, I'm like, this is the place that I want to be because of those three things. And that's where JVP Ventures, I'm like, came up with the idea of like, okay, let's get as many people involved in real estate as possible. And this is how I'm going to do it, right? By educating them properly, because it's something that we didn't learn in school. We were kind of mind fucked and brainwashed into this very thing. Go to school, go to college. If you don't go to a good college, then you're never going to get a good job. That was the first thing, right? I did fucking horrible in high school. Okay. The second piece is, okay, you go to a good college. You have to have good grades in college because you need it on your resume. Every interview I ever went on, I don't think they gave a shit what my GPA was. And honestly, you could just lie on them because they wouldn't even check anyway on what your GPA was. So it's a crock of shit. Okay. And then if you're not college material, what they say, right? The term's thrown around a lot when I was a kid. And you should go into a trade, you're a loser. And now everything's kind of flipped. The people doing the trades are making more money than people working at the banks in New York City at Merrill Lynch. It's very, very interesting concept because school never teaches you about money. So something from my career in the last decade has taught me, and what I'm trying to get my point across to as many people as possible, is to literally break down what I call Money 101. Understanding how money works and how it benefits you in different ways. I personally think it's really easy to make money. I think that's the easy part. Keeping it is the hard part. And that's the point of what JVP Ventures is trying to fulfill for people, is understanding that I came from the same exact position with nothing, with issues, and now we're creating multi-million-dollar businesses, not just one, businesses. And I'm talking about businesses doing well north of $100 million in revenue that anyone can do, right? The misconception of what I just talked about was the whole process of school, college, get a good job, work it for 30 years, and then retire. That's a made up thing. It doesn't exist anymore. $1 million is not a lot of money to retire with. If you're lucky, it will last you a decade and a half. Okay. Inflation the last year was over 7%. Okay. So you cannot survive with putting money into an IRA in an account. Like you just can't retire with $1 million. It doesn't work. But there's so many avenues of things that people can do. I could give you an item. I could give you, go understand what a cost segregation study is, and you go on YouTube, and the next day you should be able to explain it better than I can to you based on you just watching that. If I were to give one piece of advice for someone in any point of their business, wherever they are, I would tell them this exact thing. Be really, really good, best in your space at one single thing. Don't think about it. Just execute, make a decision, move on to the next thing, and do it again and again and again. If you do those couple things over and over and over again, you'll be top notch in anything that you decide to do.